Hey everybody, how are you? It is good to see you and it is good to be seen by you. And I, being the glad about doing the seeing and the being seen, am the one and only Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you live, loud and clear on a Wednesday evening where we have got fun stuff, hopefully fun stuff to get to. But before I get to it, let me ask a little favor of a certain segment of the watching audience right now. Maybe this is your first time stopping by and you're kind of feeling a vibe here. Maybe this is your 200th time stopping by. You like the content and you haven't done it yet. Whatever the case may be, if you haven't already, do me a favor and click the subscribe button and click the bell icon for notifications, because it is really super duper helpful and kind of boosts me in visibility, as they say, which sounds a bit like a pirate asking for a defensive spell in Dungeons and Dragons. Arr, boost me in visibility. But anyway, it's not. My invisibility has no problems right now. I am I have as many subscribers as most big YouTubers will lose and gain back over a weekend without noticing it. So yes, if you haven't already, please do like, subscribe, and if you're watching this in the future, from the past to the future, from a fat man, greetings. Do leave a comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm. So with that out of the way, hello to you all. Old Grognard says Insglade, excuse me. There's more than one of you. Insglade, Zachary Melvin, you may find out. Tim Imholt, who is that masked man in my green room right now, drinking up all the Hennessy and eating all the pistachios? I guess we'll find out later. Robert Santen, good to see you. And everyone else out there watching, Gonzalo, I'm not answering that question because I was told there would be no math. But anyhow, welcome all of you to the show. A special welcome if you're over there and you're watching on X. Leave me a comment over there. I always like to hear from our friends over on the site formerly known as Twitter. I would certainly enjoy that. So normally, if you're just swinging by and you're like, well, what is it you do on Wednesdays? Typically, I shouldn't say normally because it hasn't been normal for far too long. Typically on a Wednesday, my co-host Kyle Schuant swings by and we talk smack. Is basically what we do. We talk smack. And exactly, old Grognard says the calendar's made up and the years don't matter. But he has, life, family, that sort of thing happens. He is working exactly as much as I pay him for. So here on the show, I should say. Normal on the Delve. Yeah, Tracy, normal around here, right? But anyway, so Kyle's not here. Hope he is able to make it next week. I have it on good authority he will. We tested out his new PC last night. Beautiful day down in Melbourne, Australia. It was quite nice. His webcam looks sharp, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun when he's able to rejoin us. So we look forward to seeing Kyle next week. But that's not all tonight. I'm gonna gig, as it were. I'm gonna gig Zachary Melvin just a little bit about the software orbital layer. Good to see you, Michael Dale. Hello. The software proceeds apace, and I'm really happy. We are. I feel like we're coming up on a point of mechanical completion with the character creator. And what do I mean by mechanical completion? I mean, it'll do everything I want it to flawlessly. It's just that the UI needs to get massaged into something a little bit better than, you need to be a computer to figure out this computer program. So that is coming, and that's all I'm going to say. We're going to talk about it on Monday at great length because tomorrow night I have guests in the house. That's right, Thursday, tomorrow night, we're going to have Heidi Gygax Garland, Eric Garland, and John Murakami are going to join us, and we're going to talk about we're going to talk about EggCon. We're going to talk about their Kickstarter. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. And I might have a beer or two, maybe some champ. We'll have to see. Where do you log support tickets? You watch out, Gonzalo Lira's bar tab. I may press gang you for QA work on the program. But anyway, Daniel Rowan, good to see you. Dungeon Delver. No, I'm still delving in the dungeon. Programming is just one of the many hats that I wear. But speaking of people who wear many hats, I bet you guys thought that I was just going to hang out and talk smack all by myself tonight and that I had no co-host. Poor Bill. Well, that ain't true. I said there was a mysterious figure lurking over in the green room, helping himself to the refreshments that I put out there. Jokes on him. Those are just the leftovers from last night, which he himself would know about. Everybody, please, I want you to put your gauntlets of dexterity together for tonight's guest. You've seen him here. You saw him here last night as Elminar, the magic user. I've done live streams with him. He's done live streams with me. He's got a YouTube channel here at Timothy M. Holt, and I spoiled it. So everybody, please welcome Dr. Timothy M. Holt, and just start typing in your symptoms, because I'm pretty sure that means he can write your prescription. Tim, how the hell are you?
The only person I can help is if they have a broken math equation or maybe some broken code. Outside of that, I'm absolutely no use to anybody. Since it's an RPG channel, Bill, while you were talking like a pirate, I came up with a way to describe RPGs as if you were a pirate.
As if I was a pirate. Let's hear it, Tim.
Arg, matey, TTRPGs be tabletop role-playing games where you craft tales with dice, mates. Any game master, ye play heroes. Roll for fate and sail through epic quests in a world of magic and sci-fi. Grab your crew, spin a yarn, and let the adventure unfurl.
I love it. That was amazing. I'm going to clip that. I'm going to clip that and use it as a YouTube short with your permission.
Feel free. I did it with business buzzwords, too, if you want to hear that.
I'm almost frightened, too, but go ahead and hit me.
A tabletop role-playing game is a collaborative, narrative-driven experience leveraging strategic storytelling, gamified mechanics, and synergistic player engagement to co-create immersive dynamic scenarios in a structured yet flexible framework, fostering creativity and team synergy.
Oof. That I feel...
The other one's more fun.
Yeah, the other one's a lot more fun. Hello, Wheeling Dragon. Good to see you. But anyway... So Tim,
you can't get over the business.
I know the business, but I'm struggling. It's like I fell into sugar sand, and I'm just trying to. I'm struggling as it's coming back down in on me. One of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, because this is something that I get not so much anymore, but it does pop up occasionally, and I used to get asked the question. And this is kind of looming large in the discussion about the software, because I've had people PM me like, hey, are you going to add this feature from Unearthed Arcana? Are you going to add this feature from Oriental Adventures?
Welcome to my world.
Right. From Wilderness Survival Guide, Dungeoneer Survival Guide, and so on. And it got the wheels turning. Now, I know you and I have known each other, I guess a little over a year now, and we talk a lot of smack about TTRPGs together. Did you have a break point where you were ever like, okay, just for the time being, or for now, not really with a purpose, like a conscious decision, but you set AD&D aside, or whatever D&D you were playing, you set it aside for the time being with the thought of picking it back up later, and then you came back to it years later Was that kind of a process with you?
I actually did kind of not play for a number of years, but throughout some of that time, I mean, I was a new dad. I had my three kids are less. My third child was born before the first one turned 5,
Right.
so it keeps you kind of busy.
It does. It does.
And I was working full time, and during that time, I actually wrote 2 books. So it's like I just didn't have really time to play so much. And there was a 6 or 7 year period there where if you asked me what my favorite movie was, it was some version of Thomas the Train or SpongeBob SquarePants or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Like that.
I did not watch. My wife and I did not watch any grown-up movies from 2003 probably until 2018.
And it's weird when you go back, right? It's like what
It is.
this?
Yeah, it is weird, and like I'll see stuff like things that have made best ofs or worst ofs or scenes from movies, and I'm like, ooh, did that just come out? And I didn't know that came out in 2013. You were dealing with a 5-year-old and a an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old then.
The way I explained it to people was for like 7 years, pretty much the only thing I dealt with was poop.
Yeah. No, that's largely it. So speaking of poop, so the question came up, and my journey through AD&D, and I've talked about this before, is I started playing D&D in 81, and I have told this story before. I got a copy of Keep on the Borderlands, and then just kind of taught myself to play D&D with what was in Keep on the Borderlands, and then I got like a basic set and a first edition AD&D monster manual. So it was very scattershot. I was not on the inside. I was very much on the outside edge of TTRPGs. I didn't even realize until like a couple of years into my janky attempts to play D&D with my friends using the little bit of stuff I had, that there were other TTRPGs. When I first went to the FLGS here in town, which was called Enterprise at the time, I was just like, wow, there are other tabletop role-playing games. This one is sci-fi, and this one is the Old West, and what the hell,
Yeah, I mean, I started in about 82, and my dad was the first DM through Keep on the Borderlands, and I've told this a couple of times. It's like, if you were trying to talk to the bartender at the ale at the pub, and you're like, oh, he's got information. If my dad always played like, hey, we'll buy you an ale. He's like, great, now go get one out of the fridge.
Nice.
He'd actually make you bring him beer. But probably 86 or 7, wherever it was, I think I figured out Star Frontiers. And then I figured out some of the FAFSA games. They had Star Trek. I found Steve Jackson games with Car Wars. So I went through a series of others that were just kind of fun. And I grew up with a dad who was an avid Avalon Hill wargamer.
Nice.
So it lent itself to, there was always a game going on somewhere at my house, whether it was this or Atari or Sega or something.
Right.
So you were probably a more avid RPG player than I was for a lot of those years, but I think my interest in it was, it was kind of fun to exercise that creative part of your head. And you don't get too many, if you're a guy who can't draw, right? You can't do any of those other things. You got to exercise your creativity somehow.
Yeah.
And that was one of the few ways I found to actually kind of do that. And it was really important for me. And then I don't think I started after the kids, it wasn't probably till about 2-3 years, still COVID really, when I picked it back up again. So, it's a game that once you get back into it, you're kind of back into it. It's like riding a bike. You don't really forget. You might forget, spell tables or something, but that's easy to fix.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun to get back into it. And you're right, Orbital Air. Hasbro owns all the Avalon Hill stuff, and they're not going to put any of it back out. Mostly because there's If there were a call for it, I think they would. But I think if you look at tabletop hex wargaming, it's such a niche, small audience. I mean, I picked up, actually, it's sitting on my shelf right over here somewhere. I picked up a mint, never before punched out of the little cardboard version of the Avalon Hill game 1776, which had to be from like 1964. And I got it on Amazon for like $35. Right, so if they can't sell a 1960 printed game for more than $35, I mean, what's Hasbro going to make trying to put some of these out? It's next to nothing.
Yeah, and Hasbro works by economics of scale. They can knock out 50 million of something and pay a few bucks each for them because they're getting 50 million of something. Die cut counters, cardboard boxes, printed manuals, masonite or even just pasteboard maps, and folded printed boxes, four color front and back. That is expensive, even at economics of scale. They're not going to print 50 or 100,000 of something that maybe is going to sell 3,000 to 5,000 copies.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you or I go start a company, Bill, that we want to do this kind of stuff where we print out something that has and this is 1776, by the way, it's a board that's sort of 3 times this size, right? So you got to print out a bunch of these things. They're expensive to do. You got to warehouse it, hope it sells. And a lot of smaller companies take the risk out of that by doing Kickstarters where they're like, okay, I sold 5,000 of my Kickstarter or whatever the number is. And then they know how many to go ahead printed. Otherwise, you've got to go warehouse that stuff and hope somebody does and hope the rats don't eat it and it doesn't get moldy and all that other stuff. And that's expensive. So as a business owner myself, I'm like, that's a risky proposition. And then when you put the cost into it, that game, to put that out now with modern manufacturing costs, I can't even imagine what that would cost anymore. It'd be an $80 or $90 game. Just based off what I'm paying for Settlers of Catan, add-on editions for my kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of it's kind of bonkers, and unfortunately, what that means is, if you want, if your copy of Acquire or Wizard's Tower or Starship Troopers got, you kept it in your basement and it got flooded and now it's destroyed. Most of the stuff you can find on eBay in fairly complete conditions, in fairly good conditions. I mean, it's like, unless you're a collector, honestly, like, oh, I bought a copy of Camp Grip and it's missing like the second here river crossing company chit. I can't play this. You're not. No.
I get mine to play with. And Orbital Air, you're right. They're simple to print, but not many places do that kind of printing anymore, especially here in the United States. And unless you're doing it at scale, it's not cheap. So if you go try to get 1,000 or 2,000 of those done, it is not inexpensive. You're going to have to be buying 5, 10, 15,000 of them to get the economics to work out, unless everybody wants to buy $200 games.
Yeah, and
a print on demand, it's impossible. It would be too expensive to do print on demand.
Yeah, I asked Mark Miller of GDW, formerly of GDW, about the possibility of doing like a vanity run of Twilight 2000 version 1. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, it's anniversaries. This was over a decade ago, and like I think its 20th anniversary was coming up or something. Like, it was right. It was near the year 2000. And I was like, how cool would it be to do this? And he was very blunt. I think probably his tone kind of made me think that he had been asked that a lot, or maybe he's just a grumpy old man. But he was like, how cool would it be? How cool would it be if you had $30,000 to start?
That's basically, so like a bunch of my books that I've written they're all print on demand, right? So, and most sales or ebooks anyway. But let's take the print on demand question a little bit further. So printing a book in black and white, like a 300-page book, 350-page book, you can buy it for $12.99, $13.99. I did one on concussions in the NFL because I did a lot of work with that over the years. And I tried to put 8 color pages in a 200-page book, and it jumped from $9.99 to $45. Was the cheapest Amazon would let me charge. So the moment you go color or thick stock or anything like that, it takes the print on demand and drives it just insane. It's too expensive.
Yeah, it's bonkers. But so yeah, Hasbro will hang on to Avalon Hill, and they'll like Neil Blomkamp. I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but Neil Blomkamp is doing a Starship Troopers reboot. We're going to get power armor. We're going to get more history of moral philosophy, that sort of thing. But when that drops, I guarantee you Hasbro is going to release a mobile infantry app for your phone to a Star Frontiers game, but they're not going to re-release the board game Star Frontiers, the Avalon Hill game that came out in the 60s.
Well, exactly. I mean, and I think somewhere on a spreadsheet at Hasbro, they've got like a series of video versions of these Avalon Hill games that they have planned. Whether or not any of those ever come to fruition is because big companies and spreadsheets, you always have to like, okay, here's our cutoff line for this year. Everything below that falls off, right? So they're probably just waiting to mine it. Or, the other problem with big companies, and I've worked at them, is they'll buy a company like Avalon Hill because there were 1 or 2 core properties they wanted. They still go great, and then they throw the rest of them on a pile and go, well, we'll get to that if we have time.
Yeah,
and they exploit the 1 or 2 that are profitable, and then they go and move on. It's like TSR, right? They certainly took and said, "Oh, we're going to do Dungeons and Dragons," right? But Star Frontiers, Gamma World, Buck Rogers.
And there's even stuff they let go, right? I mean, Top Secret, they don't care about Top Secret, and same with Star Frontiers. They literally just let those fall away. They were there for Dungeons and Dragons. But in keeping with what I was talking about, in speaking of falling away, so I played from 81 off and on spot. I think because my parents were caught up in the whole evangelical satanic panic nonsense, which is unfortunate, and I'm not going to belabor that. But they bought me Star Frontiers. I still have my copy of Star Frontiers that Mom and Dad bought me. It's on the shelf over here.
I actually have the book of the Dungeon Master who disappeared.
Nice. So they got me Star Frontiers. They got me into Star Frontiers, and so I played a lot of that, and it was fun. But yeah, by like 1988, my AD&D book, my parents were pretty certain I wasn't going to open a gate to hell, so they didn't care. But my hardback AD&D books, which were Monster Manual 2, I think a Fiend Folio, I know an Unexpurgated Deities and Demigods, and a Dungeon Master's Guide, and my 2 box sets, which by that point the boxes were destroyed and long thrown away, so it was the contents of the expert set and the basic set in a 3-ring binder. All that stuff sat on my shelf and just took up space, and so probably by 91 or 92, the hardbacks I sold for beer money. I took to a local used bookstore and sold them quite literally for beer money. And I wish I hadn't. Of all of the rare D&D books I've got, if somebody said, "Hey, I bought these. I saw your name written inside. Here they are back," I'd be like, "Thank you so much. I appreciate that."
You want my firstborn child? You can have it.
But you'll have to fight her, and Charlotte's almost as tall as I am, so good luck.
And you got to send her to college, not my problem.
Yeah. But anyway, so I missed the entirety of the back half of AD&D because I was getting into Star Frontiers and playing less and less by 1987 or so. So things like we played long enough that my sister who gamed with us ran a Cavalier. She actually played a Cavalier, but it was in
Wow.
Dragon magazine. Did not have Unearthed
That
Arcana out yet.
that's early Dragon magazine
Yeah,
too, if I remember right.
that's in the 60s or 80s, right in there. But so by then I had turned away, and then up through the late 80s into the early 90s, I kind of wanted to start playing D&D again, but my peer group who did tabletop game, a great group of guys that I met in 1989, they had played D&D continuously since the mid late 1970s. So by 1989, 1990, I was like, cool, you guys play Dungeons and Dragons? They're like, absolutely not. We're sick of it. so
Well,
for it,
I was in the Army at that point, and we had there's always, when you're in the Army, there's always a group of guys looking for something to do. So whether it's play dominoes or play RPGs, there's always somebody around to do something, right? So I actually had when I was when I was an enlisted soldier, I actually got a multi-star, I think it was a 2-star general, to play Third Reich with me, an old Avalon Hill game.
nice.
And I got in trouble because our sort of common room in the barracks on a Sunday afternoon had a bunch of people in it. Sergeant Major walked in and got mad until he saw the general and went, "Carry on." It's like, never mind. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. But no, it was cool because you always had like all these guys around who were looking for stuff to do, and sometimes it was dominoes, sometimes it was you can always find somebody on base someplace to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. So by the late 90s, when I was getting back AD&D, when I was finally coming back to it, I ate that stuff up. When I was a kid, there was never money for modules, right? There was money for a pack of graph paper, and I could sit and draw maps all day long and populate and doing stupid stuff that adolescents do, like Tiamat is in this room, Odin is in this room. You do stuff like that with your dungeons.
You bring that up, but like for me, when Deities and Demigods came out, and for me, D&D falls into sort of 2 time spheres. I kind of got distracted by a whole bunch of stuff when AD&D really kind of hit. Yeah, I could have demanded a field promotion, but I was already on a promotion list, and I got promoted relatively quickly when I was on active duty, so I didn't care. But when Deities and Demigods came out, I got really into the Arthurian legends for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of became a distraction because I kind of started going off and reading books about that and spending time over there. And I sort of meandered around a little bit and didn't play as much. And then Dragonlance Chronicles came out.
Right on. See, and that is another one that I missed.
So I found it when the first 2 were you had to wait for the third one. I remember seeing it in the Sears catalog. It was coming out like Christmas time or something. And I was like, when I read that, I'm like, oh, I got to start playing again. So I started getting the modules for that, and it sort of became a thing at my house again. Even though those modules, if you look at the AD&D world, I will, as a very large Dragonlance fan, slightly more than Forgotten Realms, I will tell you that I love those books, especially the ones by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. But there's 200 plus books, so some of them are better than others. Okay, I'll lay that out right now.
Sure.
Some of them are disappointing. And those modules are ever so slightly railroady as compared to like some others, like Keep on the Borderlands and the Giant series and the Assassin series and whatnot. They are kind of railroady in ways, and I think partially because you read the books, you're kind of like, okay, here's what happens next, right? It got me back into it and made me want to kind of go back and learn a lot more. And that's where I discovered, I don't think I'd seen Queen of the Diamond Web Pits until then, or the crossover of the Expedition to Barrier Peaks.
Right.
And that's when I started getting really back into to Dungeons and Dragons again, outside of all that other stuff. And I think it was really my go-to, but I was a teenager. I was like, okay,
yeah,
whatever those people are willing to play, I'll do.
Right.
And especially if there were girls there, I was really willing to do
There you go. There you go.
it. When you're a 16-year-old guy, you take that option when you can get it.
Yeah. So yeah, my thing jumping back into AD&D in the mid late 90s was, you know, I wanted I basically wanted all the stuff that I missed because my wife and I were dinks. I could, I could go on to this electronic bay website and just drop a chunk of money and pick stuff up. And back then, like when I bought a Deities and Demigods, I remember I posted on Usenet, and those of you who would like to go dig this post up and find out when this was, you can feel free to. I think Google still archives Usenet. But I asked on the RPG for sale group, I said, does anyone have a copy of Deities and Demigods, the one with Elric and Cthulhu? And my response was, a guy said, yeah, I've got one. What do you want? And I said, well, let me look at my game shelf if you want anything in trade. And the guy took a copy of the Cyberpunk 2020 rules and $20.
Oh wow!
For an expurgated Deities and Demigods. So I made that particularly good deal with him, and but so I started getting all this stuff together, and then I started hitting the books, the supplements, the modules, and things that came out just before second edition. And I was like, something doesn't taste quite right here. Mm-hmm. And there was very much, to my feeling, there was a classic Coke and a new Coke of first edition AD&D. Hey, Gonzalo Lira, thank you very much for the super. I always appreciate that. Spent the 90s buying every piece of 1E and Judges Guild stuff I could get my hands on. Good for you, man. A wise decision. And again, thank you very much for the super. Yeah, so I when I was diving back in, I started finding, like, wait a minute, you mean the Wilderness Survival Guide, Dungeoneer Survival Guide, what the hell are these? I missed these. So I initially started getting those, and I found two things. When Gary was gone, the flavor, at least as far as the rules go, the flavor seemed very drained away, and those books were made of fall apart.
So here's my take on some of those, okay? And you can say blasphemer all you want, I don't care.
That's fine.
TSR, when they hit sort of Oriental Adventures time period, I think that one was still Gary, but it was sort of like right at the end of Gary's tenure or something.
I have an interesting story about it, but I'll tell you in a minute. Continue.
I noticed they got to a point at one stage. They got to a stage at one point where it was like, if they had enough pages to slap a cover on, they were going to slap a cover on it and put it out, whether or not it really deserved to be put out. It was just like, go, run. Yeah. And there were some of them that just seemed like it was like, rushed out. As somebody who's done projects, some of which have been in space, a lot of which people have heard of. If you're in the military, you probably used something I worked on. If you're in the civilian sector and if you ever got a call from a credit card company saying, hey, was this charge, if you ever got a text from your credit card company, hey, was this text you? Or was this charge you? It might have been something I worked on that did that. So I've worked on a lot of stuff that's been fielded. Sometimes you put things out that aren't ready to go out because you're in a hurry, whether that's a financial hurry, you set yourself a deadline and you screwed up, all those things happen. And for a while there, I think TSR was either setting deadlines ahead of time and they didn't really have time to do things properly, or they forgot that quality matters. And sometimes quality doesn't happen when you're on the third editing pass through something. It happens on the 19th, right? So I think Gary had an attention to detail when he was allowed to be himself, that you just didn't have when he wasn't there. It was managed by spreadsheet at that point, not managed by passion, if that makes any sense.
No, I understand. I definitely understand what you're saying, and I think that raises its head very much. I've mentioned this a lot of times before. that we had a Dungeons and Dragons after 1985 because of Unearthed Arcana. TSR was in such dire financial straits. You know, Gary sacrificed a Dungeons and Dragons movie, the D&D cartoon, and any other media for D&D for a good couple of years to save D&D by coming back to Lake Geneva, dealing with the people that he knew how to deal with at Random House, at various various distributors, hobby distributors, and that sort of thing, that the Blooms just basically treated like another module plug-in in the body corporate. Gary could go make handshake deals with these people and pal around and just kind of sit around with them and talk smack, which is what you need sometimes in business more than you need the MBA approach, which was all the rage back in the 80s, right?
As somebody who has built and sold companies, that's more important than people give it credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. But he he found out TSR was about to die. And he crash wrote Unearthed Arcana and got it published in the space of 6 months. And they went from a pre-tax profit of $4 to an after-tax profit of $23 million, which for a company with 200 employees in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin is pretty fat, right?
And remember, that's 1990 something dollars instead of
that $1985. So
$1985.
Yeah, that'd be like 80 or $100 million today. Once the Blooms saw that if they gave Gary just a little bit of creative latitude back, he could be a money machine again. I think they kind of let him have a little bit more leash, if you will. But that led to other problems, which we're not going to talk about. I'm just talking about my impressions of late first edition AD&D. And the last book that had Gary's name on it was Oriental Adventures. Now, it's common knowledge, I think, to most people, that Gary loved Asian themes in Dungeons and Dragons. Dragon turtles, Kirin, ogre magi, gold dragons, Bahamut. Just the list just goes on and on and on and on. So he was definitely keen to do that. The book was supposed to have been written. Gary wanted a guy named Francois Freudeval to write Oriental Adventures, and Francois lived in France, and so he got tasked with doing it. And nobody was hearing anything. So Jim, I can't remember if it was Jim Ward. We'll have to go to tape to find out Jim's tale. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But Jim visited Francois in France and was like, "Okay, you're right. Let's see the manuscript." And Francois got brain lock. All he had was an empty outline. So Jim called Gary. Gary said, "Jim, you're the guy. You can fix it." Jim did just that. Jim crash wrote Oriental Adventures, turned it over to TSR. TSR said, "This will sell better with Gary's name on it." And they slapped Gary's name on the front of Oriental Adventures. And Gary didn't, by all accounts, Gary didn't even know that, like, somebody brought him a copy in the office, like, "Oh, what do you think of the cover?" And he's like, why is my name on this? I did not write this book. But it also sold like hotcakes and did real well for TSR. But by then things were so sour with the Blooms. But Oriental Adventures is another one that when I came back to first edition AD&D, I was just like, meh, it didn't sound like Gary's work. It had his name on it. And I didn't know the story about it being Jim and Francois and Gary stamping his name on the cover.
It has his name on the front cover, but there's two things about this book that bug me. Is my Dungeon Master guide, which is older, holds together. This one has pages falling out all over the place because they kind of went cheap with it. Zeb Cook was certainly involved. He wrote the introduction. Mike Brialt, however you say that.
Yes.
Zeb Cook. If you look down the list here, there's Jeff Easley on cover art. You got all kinds of sort of the four horsemen that matter here. But Yeah, I mean, you could tell this was not put out to the same standard that you had on the previous stuff. Like,
Yeah, TSR was still wasting $1 per book to save 5 cents
yeah,
on a case lot. It was because bookstore, like, you take that back. You're a kid, you go in Walden Books, it's 1986, you buy that book, you go to sit over by the Orange Julius, you open it up, and the pages crumble out. You're going back to Walden Books and you're handing it to them. You're getting another one that's not made to fall apart. They're sending it back to Random House. Random House is telling TSR, hey, 50,000 books, 25,000 of them came back. So, but and after Gary left, after he was capital G gone, now I have heard varying stories. I have heard from people who were there who say, look, Gary left, we were sad, we knew there was bad stuff going on in the boardroom, but we just kept our noses down because we knew Lorraine hated gamers and was looking for an excuse to fire us all. I have heard others say, Gary left and we all breathed a sigh of relief because the drama was finally over and we could just focus on doing what we did best. And Lorraine was making sure that, like, regular paychecks came. So, I mean, it literally, I say, and I always say this, Tim, I wasn't there. I didn't work for TSR in 1986. If I worked at all in 1986, because my old man was basically press ganging me in a hanging drywall.
That's pretty much what it was for me too. But I was 14, right? So I think I was delivering papers.
Yeah.
I delivered the afternoon newspaper, the local one, and I think I made $100 a month, and most of it went to the local game shop. Actually.
Yeah, there you go.
Unless it went to the arcade, but so it was sort of a dual approach. Now I think one of the things that goes on at companies, especially when they're 200 people and down, and I've started some, I've worked at some, I've invested in some, and I'm on the board of some. If you work at, I worked at Raytheon, right? I don't know what goes on the board of Raytheon. Nobody's going to know, right? Because it's a massive, massive company. Same at Hasbro, same at anything that size. If you're at a 200-person company, you know what's going on in the boardroom, okay?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some guy like me on the board who gets pissed off and walks out like, holy shit, Tim's mad, right?
Yeah.
And that's when people start filling out resumes or something because they're like, if Tim's happy coming out of the board meeting, things are going well. If Tim's pissed, shit. Right? So sorry, I didn't mean to curse him.
No, that's okay. Gonzalo threw $5 in the fucking swear jar earlier, so we're fine.
There you go. So, but no, it's one of those things where it's like at that size company, and the one thing that I've read every history book I can find on Dungeons and Dragons, the 30-year one, the one that came out, everything's in the middle. Any of them that has ever been published, I've seen a link for, I've bought and read. I'm that big of a nerd. I can point to a couple of things inside them that all these books are written from a slightly different perspective. It's like St. Gary or St. Dave. It's one or the other, and I don't care about that part. I wanted to know what killed TSR. Where was the big problem? And there were three things that kind of did it. One was the Blooms and terrible business deals with outside sources. They were hemorrhaging cash with no-show jobs, all kinds of other things.
Right.
They had one too many parallel worlds going on where it comes to like Kryn and Greyhawk, and they had a few too many because the artwork for everything is expensive and you only have so many RPG players and so many chances to recoup that.
Right.
And the third was they should have let the book division keep doing what the book division was doing without trying to cut corners, and they started trying to cut corners on it because the book division was what was saving that company.
It really was. I mean, Lorraine Williams herself said she had thought about basically just slicing the book division out and just taking it and saying, you guys make RPGs, this makes money, so bye, sayonara. I mean, I don't know about the business mechanics of that, but by that point, late, from a gamer's perspective, from a trench eye view, Gary's gone, and you can see I'm sorry if anybody is friends with Mike Briald or or with oh, I forget. I think it was Marianne Weigel, some other people who worked at TSR back in the day and still kick around the internet. I
Rose
apologize.
Estes, you know, you don't have to.
You know, I've talked to Rose. I've talked to Rose, but to the majority of those people, not Rose because she didn't write TTRPG stuff directly. I apologize for what I'm about to say. Regardless of whether you know you were part of some grand conspiracy to tear Gary down, or you were just doing your level best day to day, the quality drop off in late first edition for me, it is like an abyssal cliff. Like, you know, you're walking out in the ocean, and you know, you're so far out that there's not even breakers. You're that far from the shore, and you stick your foot out and you can feel that drop off. You know, you can tell that there is a not inconsiderable just plunge there. And I think for me, for late first edition, it was, and it had nothing to do with the art. The cover of the book I'm about to mention is arguably one of the most recognizable and influential pieces of D&D cover art ever. Manual of the Planes. Manual of the Planes, the cover art, the guys at id Software were just like, holy shit, that's a cacodemon. What, it's an astral mauler is the name of the monster on the cover of the Manual of the Planes, and they just had their artist just trace it and do like 8 sprite rotational view of it, and bam, it went into Doom. But Manual of the Planes as an RPG product stinks on ice. And I'm sorry, I hate to give my foil hat, Tim, on, because I know you don't like this kind of thing, but I absolutely, positively, 110% believe that Greyhawk Ruins was an attempt to tear down and throw mud on Gary and his entire Greyhawk line. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the module itself, Castle Greyhawk will never be published as a complete adventure, and I know why.
Yeah, there was. I agree. I mean, there was definite bad blood because Gary wanted to take Greyhawk with him, right? And,
yeah, he kind of did in that
Gord the Rogue kind of
the Gord the Rogue books, yeah. And he made a deal where like Gord was his and the characters were his, but he had to change some place names, like instead of Grey, Gray, Hawk, that sort of thing.
I think they probably shelved it just to piss him off because they were petty little.
Which is funny because I've shared this quote before. Literally until TSR itself shuttered in 1997, when Wizards of the Coast said they sent us from downtown to clean you guys up. Greyhawk was the second best selling, if not tied with Forgotten Realms. It never went by the wayside. TSR realized that late in the game and started releasing stuff like From the Ashes and Die Vecna Die and Greyhawk Wars, and because they realized, hey, people still want this. But that was all for second edition. But there is such a notable quality drop off, whether you think it's because they were trying to screw with Gary post ex facto, or whether it was just because the corporate culture had changed the creative culture at TSR. So when people ask me like, oh, what did you think of, what did you think of WG8? What did you think of Manual of the Planes? Do you use non-weapon proficiencies from these two? I didn't have those books as a kid, so they bore no nostalgic cachet for me. Mm-hmm. When I got those books as an adult, when I would find those at used bookstores and start leafing through them, I was like, yeah, this is night and day. This is classic Coke versus new Coke, and we all know how new Coke went. Whether it was because, all versions of D&D and probably all versions of tabletop RPGs in general, when the previous edition begins to wear out, the stuff that trickles out at the end, I think this is more endemic of Dungeons and Dragons almost than any other RPG. But when an edition is ending, that's when you get your worst quality. That's when it's just be done with this. Just get this out.
So I think you're right, but the other thing that's really kind of starting to bother me, and if I could ever get in a room with some people at Wizards of the Coast, I'd be like, why do we bother anymore? Why call it a new edition? Why not just continue to do good quality stuff with the game that's working for you, instead of come out with a new edition which runs the risk of alienating half your fan base? Why not just keep mushing around inside the same world? I don't get why companies do that, because it's too hard to do. But I wanted to, you brought up Gary and his work, so I wanted to bring something up. I've got the little screen shared there. I don't know if you can throw that up.
Yes. Let me.
So this is a book out of my collection, okay? Mm-hmm. And if you've never seen this is Gary wrote a couple of books before he left TSR in the Greyhawk world. This book is one of them, and let me stop that share. I hate the way StreamYard does this, so I know it's not your fault, but I'm going to share a second picture.
Okay.
Inside that book, and there's a lot of the stuff from when Gary was in charge, you'll find interior art like this one that Bill's about to put up there. Like, it's a pencil drawing inside the book.
Yes, Clyde Caldwell.
Thank you. They took time to put chapter art and interior art inside the books, because after a while, especially as a kid, you'd be reading through it like, what the heck does Gord look like? You try to picture it in your head. Gary wanted you to know what was in his head, so he would take the time to put that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah.
In a paperback novel, which never happened. And then as soon as he left, that kind of went by the wayside in favor of do it faster, better, cheaper, because that takes time and money. The other thing that I will tell you is after reading those books, and this is why I think it was so important, and Gary had an interesting, I don't know if it was on purpose or just sort of happened, but when they had the release of Dragonlance Chronicles, I think it was a brilliant move to start bringing in sort of parallel novels with the game, because when I was reading that book, there's a scene in it where Gord is, you just met him. He's kind of starting off in his career. He's not Gord the Rogue yet. He's Gord. Because that's where everybody starts. But he's shopping in this town, and he's looking at daggers, right? And he's sorting through which one's a +1 dagger. Ooh, this one might be magical. That one might
I remember the scene. Sure. I remember the scene. Buying from the gnome.
Yeah, and he goes into so much detail, like sorting through which dagger he really wanted and why different aspects were important and why this one feels different than that one. And I'm like, it made me want to play in that world, right? And it kind of made me see, as an RPG player, okay, now I kind of get a lot more of +1 and special and magic, because without that sort of tie-in novel, I think the game is cool, but I think that multimedia kind of approach to the company, I think, lifts it a lot higher. I think without the parallel novels, you don't have the RPG world you have today. Because I think they really did serve to lift it. I think it'd still be there, but I don't think it would be there to the same level that it is now.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And there is one little side story I'd like to share, because I know you're a big fan of Dragonlance. It's not my favorite thing. I really should read them someday. I mean, all of my jokes about them aside, I really should read them someday. What turned me off was, what turned me off, Tim, was I picked up a stack of the modules in a used bookstore. Again, this was in the very this was in the 90s, in the late 90s, and you could walk into a hobby shop and buy first edition AD&D stuff for like $10, right? But I mean, hell, in 1992, I could have bought a wood grain OD&D set for the princely sum of $50 fucking.
Now it's more like it starts.
And I thought
it
was, I thought it was dumb, and I spent my $50 on comics books and a Mobile Suit Gundam model. Anyway, so I saw a stack of Dragonlance modules, and I was like, Dragonlance, all right, let's check out Dragonlance, because I actually played a Dragonlance computer game. I bought it for my Amiga in like 1989. It was a side scroller. It was weird. It was like a beat 'em up, but side scrolling RPG. But I leafed through the module, and like the center section of the module was a music staff and a song to play. And I picked up another one and leafed through it, and there was a recipe for like fried potatoes, and I was like, what in the hell even is this? This is not the D&D that I put it down, and I was like, ugh, okay, Dragonlance sucks. I'm not going to bother with this. Piano notes and fried potatoes. That's not, I need to know about ogre killing and dragon slaying and stuff like that. So
I'll tell you why it appealed to me was when I brought home, my dad used to have this rule. When you went to the mall with Dad, he would go to Walden Books or B. Dalton's and buy 2 paperback books. And his answer was, by the time I finish the second one, be back. And Dad was a fast reader, so it wouldn't take me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those were the first books I brought home that Dad was like, can I borrow that second one? That was pretty good. So it was kind of nice to have that connection. And I think that's what attracted me to Kryn as much as anything else. Truth be known, Forgotten Realms is probably a better realm to play in. It's got way more, it's more sandboxy. Kryn tends to be very kind of pushy with the pre-written modules. And Alan had a question about parallel worlds. So what I mean by that is when TSR was TSR, they had, there's only so many people that are going to play RPGs. And I don't know that this relates to the OSR or not, but what I mean by parallel worlds is for a while you had Kryn, Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, you had all these different worlds in which you could go play. Along with that, if you're the company, you have to go develop lore, artwork, books, box sets, all kinds of things. And as an RPG player, I'm only going to spend so much money. So if there's seven realms for me to go off and buy, I might only be able to afford 3 of them. You get to go pay the development costs for all of them. Whereas if they'd focused as a business on 3 or 4, they would have sold a much larger number of copies of those 3 or 4 and made more money and done better as a company. That's all I mean by that. I had to put I had to put my working venture capital hat on for a second. So.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So yeah, and you touched on something else too. That is a lot of what I saw when I was when I again coming back to first edition AD&D and seeing all the stuff that I quote unquote missed out on, and I was just like, yeah, I don't want any of it. None of this is the nitty gritty D&D that I liked and remembered. So, I had the vast buffet because by 1999, 2E was essentially moribund, and I didn't want anything to do necessarily with second edition, and the late 1E stuff. I don't think, as far as adventures, that is better exemplified. And I actually kept these for a really long time because I think they had good adventure seeds. They were kind of handy, but there were 2 books that TSR put out late, and I think they came out in '88. That's how late they were in the D&D product, AD&D 1E products cycle. But was the Book of Layers and the Book of Layers 2. And I always read them with the idea that they struck me as module ideas that were pitched. And then they said, nah, I don't know. I don't really see that as a 3 module run idea. Thanks, but no thanks, But there's a thing in corporate America. And Tim, you know this probably better even than I do, where you got to look busy. If somebody comes and says, "Hey, what'd you get up to this week?" Your answer can't be, I came up with some kind of I don't know, some ideas, I guess. You gotta throw around like synergize and bland and outline and stuff like that. You gotta do stuff like that to keep your neck off the chopping block. So I think at the end when TSR was just like, ideas, people, give me some ideas. How about we just scrape up all the stuff that we haven't published in modules and we'll edit it and publish it? Brilliant, do that. And so we wound up with the Book of Layers and the Book of Layers 2, which were they were just a little bit thinner than like a module copy of the Temple of Elemental Evil, so call it like 80 pages, and they were all just adventure seeds. Like, oh, here's a grove with 82 goblins in it, and they captured a farmer and his wife. It's just a rough sketch of ideas. And go.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually found one of those at a half price books not that long ago, and I looked at it and I'm like, no, not even I'm going to get this one. It looked like the bar napkin version of putting a book together. It's like, hey, get all those bar napkins we're going to throw away, and let's slap a label on it and charge $14.
And that goes back to my overall feeling about late 1E products. And again, bless their hearts, I know there were people under duress. Some of them were merrily working away. Again, I've heard from people who around that time were like, yeah, there were some rumblings in the boardroom, but I was living the dream. I was working for TSR and I didn't care.
Sure. Let me throw this at you another way. So
all right.
I've worked in research labs, and I've had my own research lab, and I can tell you, like, when you work for certain people, they bring this sort of energy to the lab, or they bring this sort of energy to a project. So think about early days of Disney. You could really tell which movies Walt Disney was personally involved in and which ones he wasn't, just by kind of watching it, because he brings the passion into it. And he excites people, and he gets people moving. Yeah, I was working at TSR. It's a different thing. Man, I was in the thing with Gary today, and we were kicking ideas around, and I had all these. It's two different energies. There's TSR, and then there's TSR, right? And
right,
it's nice to be able to kind of excite people and get them moving, but not everybody has that skill, right? So, I've worked with some brilliant people, and I've worked with some people who were not as brilliant, but really good at exciting people and getting them to do stuff. And guess which group has better output, right? It's the one that everybody's excited to be there.
Yeah.
Instead of the one where they're not. So
I remember years ago, somebody, and I don't even remember the format, if it was on a web forum. It wouldn't have been on Twitter. It was long enough ago that Twitter was still kind of niche. And Twitter, it may have even still been like 140 characters long ago, but I think it was on a web forum. Somebody said, "Hey, when I was a kid back in 1992 or 93, my family and I drove from point A to point B, and that took us through Lake Geneva, Wisconsin." And I asked my folks if we could stop, because that's where TSR was. So we found the TSR offices, and they let me come in and take a few pictures. And he posted up the picture. They were either 35 millimeters or Polaroids that they had then, of course, scanned for the purpose of posting them. And I was struck by how sterile it looked. It literally, he could have said, "We stopped by Hammer Mill Papers corporate office, and I asked if I could take some pictures," and they said sure. It just like, here's where the secretary sits. Here's a wall of some publishing awards, and this goes back into the cubicle farm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, take Apple for a second, right? So when Steve Jobs was there versus when he wasn't, were two different worlds. Mm-hmm. And say what you want about Steve, and some people will say he was a dick, but yeah, he was an effective dick.
Yeah.
But there was, you also had Steve Wozniak, when the whole place went public, he's like, "Can I just have a cubicle back with the engineers?" And that was sort of their idea factory was, hey, if we need something new, it's like, let's go get Woz and the guys to take a look at it. Right. And
Yeah.
sure enough, they'd crank out something new. And I've personally met Woz on a number of occasions and have talked to him a number of times. And he's like, yeah, Steve was a dick, but you just kind of had to know how to deal with him. It's like,
Yeah.
so,
No, it's
he's a dick, but
absolutely
he was our
right.
dick, so it's okay.
You and I have talked about this before, but guys out there watching, listening, let me tell you what. Just if we could get pull off to a geeky rest stop for a second. Do yourself a favor and check out the website folklore.org if you haven't already, because a whole bunch of former Apple engineers tell tales out of school there, and some of them are maddening. Like I'm gonna mess this gentleman's name up. I think it was Harold Buress. I could be wrong about that. He got so mad at Steve Jobs that he like walked to his house one night there in Cupertino and stood outside Jobs's house throwing rocks at Steve Jobs' windows.
Would believe that, actually. There's actually a pretty good book by Walter Isaacson that was Steve Jobs' biography.
I've heard of it, yes.
That actually kind of tells the truth about him, including his issues with his estranged daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't like worship at the altar of Steve. He's pretty open and honest about the whole thing. And,
Yeah.
And Gary, I mean, you met Gary and I don't think there's a biography about him, and there probably should be. But
the closest you're going to get, and it's an excellent film. I absolutely adore it. It's called The Dreams in Gary's Basement. It is a documentary film. I think that's a good one. But as far as an actual book, no, there is.
But he was one of those guys that I think inspired, and you told me the story, actually. So, he had this new game he wanted to play, and he was talking to an author who loved to do creative things. So he flew to Florida to play with Andre Norton.
Yes.
Who shortly after that wrote Quiet Keep, which is the first book actually set in Dungeons and Dragons. It's done much differently than the books that came later, but he inspired, right? Because of his never ending energy inside this stuff.
As long as you weren't expecting to make a super living at it in the early in the mid to 1970s to the very early 1980s, if you were a creative person, TSR was where you want to be. Listen, I've had Errol Otis on the show, Tim, and if you haven't watched that interview, guys, go check it out on my channel. It is an amazing interview. I love talking to Errol. He was 17 years old, Tim. And he piled into a Volkswagen, and his pilgrimage, not to San Francisco, not to like the Sedona Desert, not to Fort Lauderdale, to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, to draw surreal art for TSR, because that was where the creative people were going, man, and it was that kind of thing.
I got to tell you something really funny. Okay, this is completely not related to RPGs, but Bill's going to go, holy crap, this makes a lot of sense.
All right, lay it on me.
When I graduated high school, I joined the Army on the late entry, and I had a couple of weeks before I left. And my dad was like, you're leaving anyway. Hey, you graduated high school. Where you want to go? Here's the car keys, a gas credit card, some cash. Go wherever you want. Be back here before you leave, right? So I had 3 weeks to Dad was paying, and I was staying at cheap motels because I didn't have an unlimited budget, but
sure,
when you're 18 and you have a 280ZX and a couple of weeks, shit, I'm going everywhere, right?
Right.
So I wound up in Silicon Valley because that's where an 18-year-old kid goes, right? So, and I wanted to tour Cray supercomputers. So I call ahead with my name, Mr. Imholt. I don't give him my first name because I don't want him to realize I'm a kid. And I go into Cray Supercomputers. My dad was an early software engineer from 1962 through the end when he went through after 2001, after the Y2K bug. And I got to Cray Supercomputers, and they come out. They're like, "Oh, we thought you'd be older." I was like, "What?" They thought I was my dad, and they were actually sending.
That's hilarious.
They were sending a recruiter out to try to hire him, and I was like, so I called my dad that night. I'm like, "Dad, I think I got a job offer for you." He's like, where in the name of God are you? And I was like, I was at Cray Supercomputer City. He goes, I give you 3 weeks off and you go to a freaking computer. It's like, what is wrong with you? Go to a baseball game, something. Come on. I was like, okay.
That is hilarious. I love that story.
I wanted to see big computers.
But I mean,
it was cool. Liquid cooling towers and everything was awesome.
So we're doing it again. We're swerving off the highway, but I'm going to mention this. The first the first Cray supercomputer, and you guys look this up. It's wild. It's, for lack of a better term, PC Tower was a circular structure. That. And the reason it had that shape, Tim, do you know why Cray supercomputers were in that very tight circle?
I actually do.
You do. So I will tell our friends out there in TV land, the first Cray supercomputers had...
There's what they look like if you want to put it in the thing.
Yes, I do. And that is the exact model I'm talking about. And in case you're curious, yes, that was a bench you could sit on.
And this was inspiration for... something in Doom, by the way, as well.
So the Cray computer tower was shaped that way because they wanted the shortest possible electrical paths, because back then a lot of circuitry was small, but it was not microcircuitry. Seymour Cray hired expert embroiderers, women who could do this incredibly fine detailed embroidery to weave circuits in those machines. And the reason it had that semicircular C shape wasn't just because, hey, it's C for Cray. It was because they wanted the they wanted the computer itself to have the shortest access paths to the ferrite ring memory modules in it.
The drift velocity through copper of electrons is only so fast, right? So it's not going to go faster, and it kind of kept it cool. So, like, you know, I mean, Moore's law for years, the way they got computers to be faster and faster was by shrinking those data pathways more and more, and then we hit the limit where I think they're down to like 20 nanometers now.
Yeah.
And for point of reference, a hydrogen atom from electron cloud to electron cloud is 0.1. So you're like 200 hydrogen atoms across. You're not getting much smaller.
Yeah, no, you're getting to the point where the data paths are narrower than the electron that is trying to go down them.
Getting close to quantum effects taking place, which is why quantum computers are a thing. So,
but to go back to D&D, to step away from the machine of Lum the Mad for a second, there was just this. I guess that kind of finishes me as far as that goes. So when people ask, like, I'm not like, screw you, pleb, I'm hardcore. I know I make a lot about, you know, D&D is like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and there's blood on the swords and drugs mentioned in the books and all that. Yeah, that is part of it. And that vibe did very much go away after Gary left. Lorraine Williams and the Blooms were terrified of another satanic panic, when what they don't realize is, as disappointed at heart that Gary was that people were burning D&D books and they were calling him a monster for opening the gates of hell and whatnot, he said to me, Bill, they had to buy the books if they wanted to burn them. TSR said when 60 Minutes came in and did a murder of Gary on the air, TSR sales skyrocketed. As angry as he was at Ed Bradley, as angry as he was at 60 Minutes, the next weekend, their sales took off. And I would wager, if you out there watching, or even you, Tim, and probably me, if you found a minty condition first edition Dungeon Master's Guide in a used bookstore and you ask, gosh, did anybody even ever play with this? It's just got a little bit of shelfware. The odds are probably no. They bought it after that weekend or after that episode aired to see what the big deal was. Maybe they played D&D once or twice. Then it went on a bookshelf. Then it got forgotten. Then it got put in an attic until they said, hey, these are worth a few shekels. I'll
And
take
also,
one to the used bookstore.
and also, guys, if you're watching and you hear me, and I beg you, if you're looking on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Half Price Books, wherever, and you see something, you're like, wow, that's a first edition, whatever, and it says rare and it's priced in the hundreds of dollars, please reach out to Bill or I and see if it's actually rare.
Yes.
Because I was in Half Price Books one day and I've picked up some modules at Half Price Books that are first edition modules for like $15. Some of the Slaver series actually that we're running through, I picked up one for $15.
No peeking.
It's the next one. But I've also seen them where they're like, oh, this is rare and it's $300, and it's really not, right? So if you're about to drop real money on one, please reach out to Bill or I through any of the social media platforms. I answer pretty fast usually if I can.
I will gladly walk you through a Pawn Stars-esque assessment of what you've got. A buddy of mine has an FLGS down here. It's awesome. Hi, Todd and Anna over at Gods and Monsters. I hope you guys are well. And sometimes people come in and they do that. They bring in a box full of D&D books and they're like, hey, can I get $500 for this book that says Gary Gygax on the cover? And they call me up and they're like, hey, Bill, what is this worth? And I'm like, let's see. That's a Monster Manual 7th. It's got white fly leaves. It's got this $7 pages. Yeah, exactly. Like Todd, I would give him 12 in store credit or like 8 cash because they're not that rare, and it infuriates me because, again, to go back to the latter half first edition stuff, it is just such a grabby, it just everybody like, oh, this beat up copy of Basic, I'm gonna put it on eBay and ask $60 for it. You're like, well, that's like $6.
Even the rare version of Deities and Demigods is not rare.
No, 200. So I thought it was around 50,000 copies. Jim Ward disabused me of that. He said the unexpurgated version, they probably printed 250,000 copies before the Blooms stepped in and said, stop promoting Chaosium, put different stuff in there, and that was the end of that. But still, 250,000 copies of a book, that's like,
I own 2 first edition Hunt for Red Octobers. Okay. That's hard to find.
Yeah.
That one is super easy.
I have some rares around me. I have a true first print Dungeon Master's Guide, a true first print Monster Manual, and a true first print Player's Handbook. I think I got a couple of those. I got a white box copy of OD&D up there on the shelf behind me. I think you guys can maybe just see it a little bit up there. I've got some pastel modules, when TSR wasn't doing the full 4-color. But yes, I have owned 13 that should be the proof. I have owned 13 unexpurgated copy. 15 now unexpurgated copies of Deities and Demigods, the ones with Elric and Cthulhu. And to be honest with you, I mean, just look around. The information age makes it a little bit more difficult, but don't, like, if you're just getting back into, like, I know Vinny there, you're kind of you've gone out, you got into first edition a little bit later. So if you're like Vinny and you're trying to do that, you're like, Bill, the way Bill says first edition AD&D makes me want to play it. Please don't go spend the money you were going to get dental work done with on AD&D books, especially second half, because they don't even burn good.
The one that bothers me to no end is Deities and Demigods, right? Because everybody wants the unexpurgated version. I'm like, there's 2 mythos in there that you don't get in the unexpurgated version, and it drops the price like stone, right? And honestly, you can Google them and find those 2 mythos if you really want to use them.
There is
and I think I've used them in adventures twice. So
there is I mean, the artwork is excellent. Trampier and Sutherland and LaForce and well, no, it was Jeff D. Trampier did some of the art. Definitely Errol Otis. I don't remember who did all the art in those sections, but the point is the art is gorgeous, and yeah, it's worth seeing. But now I'm about to I'm about to express something. Some people ethically vehemently disagree with me on, but this is my thought. If a book, a recording, whatever, a film is completely out of print, it's totally out of production, and it's never going to come back in production. Wizards of the Coast is never going to find a copy, an unexpurgated copy of Deities and Demigods, cut apart, do a high resolution scan, and publish and sell. They're not going to do it. The Deities and Demigods you can get on DriveThruRPG is the expurgated, the non Cthulhu and Elric book. It is out there on the web. I think it's on archive.org, and it's a beautiful scan. If you want an unexpurgated Deities and Demigods, download the scan as a PDF and send it to Lulu, send it to Printivity, take it to your local. If you take it to your Office Max and get it printed there, you might get a new gamer for your campaign. I've heard of that happening. Like, people take stuff to print shops and are like, "Can you print this up?" Yeah. Oh, you play D&D? I'm looking for a game. So hey.
So here's one that I'll give you another example of that. So Dragon Magazine, which is getting harder to find because collectors like me are buying them up. Mm-hmm. There's still lots of them out there, so please don't pay a lot for any of them, because I'm paying
hundreds of thousands of issues.
Yeah, and I'm paying $7 a piece or something. I'm buying them 50 at a time, but still. They printed something that I still cannot find the copy of it because it's an early one. And Bill, I'm going to share another screen here. They did something I've used in an adventure now because it was funny. They made character sheets for Saturday morning cartoon characters.
Yes,
including Daffy Duck. And if you look carefully at Daffy, it's like, he's invincible, and he gives you all this background for Daffy. And it's kind of funny because he does no damage really per attack. He does like 1 hit point of damage because he's Daffy Duck. He never hurts anybody.
Right.
But if you look at his number of attacks, he gets a lot of them, but his hit points are not applicable. Because if you go read the background on him, he's impervious to damage.
How many times in I can't remember the name of the cartoon, but Rabbit Season, Duck Season, did Daffy get shot in the face with a double barrel shotgun, which, I mean, if we're even attempting to apply real world logic, looked to be about like an 8-gauge shotgun.
It also says the more often you hit him, the more annoyed he gets. Okay.
Yeah.
So, which was actually kind of true. But that kind of stuff is out there. So if you really want to play the game with any number of like gazillions of options, they are out there, and they're on the web, and you can PDF them and you're home free. So
yeah, I mean, when people ask me, they thought, "Oh, I want to play first edition AD&D again. That looks so cool." But I mean, I looked on eBay. I'm like, stop. That was your first mistake. Just pump the brakes.
DriveThruRPG, get the PDF.
DriveThruRPG. And it's not like, if you're like, "No, I need the physical books." No, I completely get it. DriveThruRPG. All of the editions of D&D prior to, I mean, they might do print on demand now, but like from original D&D, you guys out there who are more fans of Basic will have to spell me on this, but I know the Rules Cyclopedia, original D&D, so Rules Cyclopedia, you got your basics kind of summed up in one there. First edition AD&D core books, second edition AD&D core books, third edition Dungeons and Dragons core books, fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons core books are all available print on demand. You can have them. You don't have to break the bank, and you don't have to be like me and wade through tons of late post Gary TSR bad stuff.
And Hasbro knows they're doing it. They've got a deal with them, so it's perfectly licensed. It's not, you're not being like, it's not like, oh, they had to cut out 10 pages. You're getting the actual thing just in PDF form. Just go to Kinko's and print it out. You're fine. It's the exact same thing. There's no difference.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, if you need a physical book in your hand, and I'm kind of with my erstwhile co-host Kyle on this. We probably all have multiple gigabyte collections of RPG stuff. How you got it is entirely up to you. I'm not going to have that discussion, but that you've curried away on hard drives, guys. Free up your disk space. You're never going to use it. I'm serious. Free up your disk space. You're never ever going to use it. You know you're not going to use it. It's just taking up space on your hard drive. But a physical book, you will get that down. You will take it to the park with you. You will sit in line waiting to pick your kids up to read it. You will surreptitiously have it laying on the pew next to you, you dirty sinner, instead of reading the Bible. You will use a physical book if you have a physical book. That's my thought. So if you're gonna go through drive-through to get your AD&D books, do the deal where you get a PDF, yes, but you also get a physical copy, even if it's a softback copy. That's just my soapbox rant.
I mean, I don't know that you need to delete it because I just looked it up. You can now get a 2 terabyte hard drive, solid state device for $130. So I think you can. I mean, the storage space is cheap.
Yeah.
Alan had a question. I really do think that Dragon Magazine did a great deal in some cases to make it more interesting. Good night, buddy.
Good night.
Sorry, my son was saying good night.
That's fine.
I think they were hit or miss, right? And here's the problem: when you're trying to appeal to a mass audience, I might like some and dislike others, but you may like the opposite ones from me. So I think it added something, but I don't think it brought new people into the hobby. I think it was, if you were in the hobby already, you cared about it. If you weren't in the hobby already, it didn't. And that to me is one of the things that has been interesting over the years to watch, is what attracts new people in, right? Because for me, it was 82. Everybody was kind of talking about it. It was, I was the nerd amongst nerds and made fun of, and I didn't care because it was just sort of life for me. But getting people to actually play the first time is challenging. And I think now we have a whole nother problem. So like, thanks to the interwebs, the interwebs, something, this funny World Wide Web thing.
It's a series of tubes.
It's a series of tubes that kind of transmit data here and there. There's some confusion on people that may want to play the first time because they see shows that are out there that will argue, but this edition had that and that edition had this, and they get into like this nitty gritty. Ooh, there was a comma that changes the meaning of the rule. Yeah. And I think that confuses people. So I think one of the things the hobby has to do going forward, and one of the things I would urge Wizards of the Coast to do, and I think some of the indie guys do better, but then some of the indie guys don't do as well because indies are all over the map, is you got to reach out to that new player. If you're only reaching out to people like me who've been playing a long time, you're kind of cutting the hobby short, right? You got to reach out to like teenagers in early 20s and 30s and get them to want to come to the table too. And that's where I think Dragon Magazine didn't necessarily do very much to bring new people in. But I will tell you this, I think 2 things in the last 10 years brought more people into this hobby than anything else. And it's not 10 years, it's less than that. I'm just drawing a blank on how many years it's been. Stranger Things brought a crap ton of people back in the hobby and brought new people in. And Critical Role. Pick on them all you want. They brought new players into the game.
I have said more and more about, and I absolutely believe this with Critical Role. It is very much of a don't hate the player, hate the game. And I like Critical Role for everything negative I have said about Critical Role, tongue in cheek, and some of it dead serious. Those kids have got amazing hustle, and they have done an exceptional job at building that Critical Role brand and putting D&D out there. I am kind of finicky about people's predilections about tabletop gaming, but my first reaction, if somebody says I got interested in D&D by watching Stranger Things, or I got interested in D&D after watching Critical Role, I may kind of chuckle and say, well, it's a little different from what you've seen on TV. and then we plow on, and I introduce them to the game. That's I don't like flip out. If someone genuinely wants to play and isn't just there as a tourist, because it's the it thing to do, and I think that's slacking off anyway. I think that crowd has moved on, I don't know, to something else. But
yeah, and I think Critical Role may be pulling them out of Dungeons and Dragons, but they're still in RPGs, which is fine. Because I play RPGs that aren't Dungeons and Dragons too. In fact, the one I've been playing recently is Fallout.
Oh, the Fallout, yeah.
And I just got one the other day that is a D12 system from an indie group called Horde Wars. That looks like a lot of fun. I need to do.
I have heard about Horde Wars. I've kind of passed a little bit of chit chat back and forth, and I think we may have to have the Horde Wars guys on the show here real soon.
I had them on my channel.
Excellent.
And one of their creators is a physicist, so it worked out. And yeah, Big Bang Theory, I think, brought some people in too. Thank you, Orbital Air. I completely forgot about Sheldon. And by the way, when I worked at MIT, I will give everybody a Big Bang Theory inside joke. Sheldon's work on his wall, and actually all the guys' work on their wall, was cutting edge work in whatever field the guys were pretending to work in. So Sheldon always had cutting edge string theory on his wall and everything else. And there were professors at MIT when I worked there that would actually watch the show to see if their stuff showed up on the wall. And they would do screenshots and put it on their office doors. It's like a moment of, hey, look, it wasn't, hey, I got my paper into, physical review or proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences or whatever. It was, look, I was on Big Bang Theory. There was a guy who had a Nobel Prize, but was happier about the fact he would much rather talk to you about his work being on Big Bang Theory than he would about his Nobel Prize, which was crazy.
Nice.
But still. Nice.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I guess the takeaway for me is that as it is not 2000 anymore, as D&D has evolved, you can find whatever orthodoxy you want to settle into. I mean, I know people who are like, yes, I love first edition AD&D, all the way up to the last issue of Dragon magazine that talks about first edition AD&D. I know people who are like, yes, I love first edition AD&D, up to and including, but no further than the release of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Anything after that was crap, and it's where it began to fall off, even with Gary in charge. There is a D&D out there for you, wherever you draw that line in the sand, wherever you say that things didn't. And you brought up Dragon Magazine, and I'm glad you did. That is one place I think that I don't think the fall off was as acute as far as quality. I still like reading Dragon Magazine's past, like, I think calendar wise, it's around 138, 136, something like that was the month and the year that Gary departed. I think Dragon Magazine kept a pretty consistent quality. My only gripe about Dragon Magazine is when I would deal, like, when I was getting back into playing in the early 2000s, people were like, oh yeah, we do this, we use good hits and bad misses. It's the crit table for D&D. And I'm like, Dragon Magazine was not TSR official rules. we're not. So here's
using one for
that.
You, Bill. So you and I will have to do a show sometime specific on 2 articles that were in Dragon Magazine. The backstory for Gully Dwarves.
Okay.
And the backstory for Kender.
All right. Sure, I'll look at it. I'll tell you what the meta backstory, not the meta backstory for them, but the meta backstory of one of the creators. I had a dear friend, and Tim, this is one of those cases where, and I wish this for everyone in my audience, because if Eric were still with us, I would have would have basically wrangled him. I would have had forced him, and I think he would have enjoyed it, into being like a weeknight co-host on the show. Eric, you would have loved this, and Tim, I think you would have really enjoyed Eric's perspective. I talk about Eric and all the tiny bit I knew about him compared to the person that really was there on the anniversary of his passing. And I probably will this year raise a glass to him at least. But I did not tell you that to tell you sad things. Eric and I were BSing one day about D&D. He played remotely with us when that was not an easy thing to do. He would come in over Skype, and I had a lapel mic, and I would unclip it and hold it out so people at the table could tell Eric or ask Eric questions while he was playing. And Eric once told me after a game, he's like, I had so much fun. You are tied as the best DM I have ever gamed with. And I took that as a high praise. And I said, okay, well, I got to ask, who's the best DM that's ever DM'd a game for you? And he said, oh, it's my DM back in Utah. He was a guy back in Utah, and he worked at an FLGS, and he had his own campaign world. He wrote his own campaign world, and then he got hired and had to move away. But he gave me a bunch of his campaign notes, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. What was his name? Tracy Hickman. So yeah, Eric's DM was Tracy Hickman, and Eric had or has a collection of handwritten and typed notes of Tracy's that Tracy just gifted him. So it proto Dragonlance stuff. But according to Eric, regardless of what you played in the Dragonlance modules and what you read in the books, according to Eric, Tracy was an absolutely brutal killer DM. He was like, he just no quarter given, none taken. Absolute after every encounter, roll a d6. So you could literally have cascading wandering monsters coming to see what was making all the noise and never survive.
I get it. So, well, I think that's part of the beauty of the game, right? To me, the game is about learning, is about cooperating and trying to work as a team. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I think, especially this generation, needs to learn a lot more of, is figuring out how to actually work cooperatively, because everything now is a first-person shooter, and let's go off and attack each other and see who wins. Yeah. And more you see sort of that same mantra in society where people forget sometimes you got to actually work together and shit. And that's one of the things that I think a killer DM like that does is he makes people actually think as a team instead of a group of individuals. And if I could pick on the Tuesday night crew at all, it would be nice to have fewer PCs that are pacifists in our group.
Hey, you gotta take that up with Thane Kyle, Tim. I as the DM. No, I think he's doing okay playing a character okay from an interesting perspective.
I'm just kidding. It's good to have, if you got a pacifist who's your healer, I guess it works. But if
he's not. Yeah, he's gonna keep plenty of, as the kids say today, buff spells and healing spells to hand, as opposed to, I just wanted to have create water so I could see if I could make a pint of water appear inside the brain of the monster, and then to find out that I'm like, no, you can't do that. Well, whatever. I think you're right. And something, again, I think this goes to the fall off at TSR, because TSR was trying to stay out of the sights of the moral majority. Google it for anyone out there who's 30 or younger. When the passion started to go away, I think the sense of color outside the lines adventure started to go. You were very much directed down a path of made for TV, follows network standards and practices type of adventure models. Gary, along with Dave Sutherland, sent you out to the fringes of reality to fight a spider goddess in a steampunk starship on a desert asteroid. And your lives, not just your characters' lives, but your souls were at stake. Because if you die when you're in the abyss, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not getting home.
I think you're talking about Queen of the Diamond Web Pits.
Queen of the Demon Web Pits, yes.
Demon Web Pits. Sorry.
But you know, and he put you on an abandoned starship where you could what does this do? Disintegrate, roll up another character, Tim, you know, and you know, it just stuff like that.
I actually have a picture of mine. You're talking about that one.
Come on, StreamYard. That's the one.
Mine, as you can see, has some stains on it.
Yes, as all good modules should. I you know, back in the 70s and 80s, I think he could have made a small fortune providing pizza staining service for role-playing gamers. I show up with a few pepperoni and a couple of black olives and just slip them into your book and pat it a couple times, sprinkle a little Dr. Pepper, and then move on. But no, I think, and when we hit, and I know you know, and I know the audience knows that this was not Wizards of the Coast themselves, but they praised it and celebrated it when we've reached a point where you all play baristas in a college town. God damn it, if I'm 25 years old and I'm looking to escape the grind, odds are I am a barista in a college town, and I don't want to come home and pretend to be another one.
Well, you know. Yeah, I think that's part of the problem we have with when you get out of the Garys of the world running companies like this and you get to the spreadsheet managers. It's you're going to put out 3 adventures every year no matter what, right? Well, what if only 2 of them are ready because for some reason we had you play tested, it didn't work, or whatever it is, right? Sometimes with creative stuff, you can't do it on a schedule like big companies want. And I think TSR suffered from that towards the end. It was like, okay, you 2 guys sit down. You're going to put out 4 adventures in the next 6 months. Well, okay, but what if one of them play tests like crap? I don't care. It's going out anyway because it's finished, right? You know, you get that sort of mentality. And that's part of why, at this stage of my career, I work with a lot of creative stuff. And, I told somebody one day, I'm like, well, what size company would you work for? I'm like, well, first off, if they have an HR department, I probably am never going to work there again because they're too big. And partially because I would be sent to HR all the time. It just wouldn't be fun for me. And the HR person would be like, again? Really? Yeah. So even like one of the companies I own a substantial part of one day that has an HR department, they have somebody follow me around when I'm in the building because it's like, Tim's here. We need to pay attention to what he says just in case HR gets involved. Because apparently when you ask a Gen Xer, and I hope some people here that are listening are Gen X, I know you are, Bill. When you ask a Gen Xer our opinion, we're going to give it to you. You just may not like the delivery method.
Yeah.
And some people are precious little snowflakes and don't like that sometimes. Exactly.
You're talking to people who drank from hose spigots bolted to concrete walls when we were thirsty. It's like you're out for summer. We don't turn around and go home and get a bottle of Dasani. Yeah. Hey, that yard has a hose, and we'd run up and drink from it, and we were out at dark. What are you doing out at dark? Who knows?
One of the houses when we lived in New Jersey before we moved to Dallas, on two or three doors down there was this Italian grandmother that lived, and next door to us there was a Greek family. If you were a kid and you looked like you might be hungry in the next hour, somebody was throwing food at you. You just weren't allowed in the house because that would make it messy. So there was food everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. If a summer passed in your life and you were born between like 1965 and I will say as far as late as 1985, but if a summer passed in your life and someone who you only vaguely knew didn't hand you an orange push-up pop, on a hot Saturday, just like you're in a backyard, you're playing war with sticks. It looks like guns or swinging branches around, pretending to be Luke Skywalker, and that's
Oh,
your lightsaber.
I
And
had the Mattel M16 that when you pulled the trigger, kind of made that noise.
there you go, there you go. And somebody's mom or dad or aunt or older sister didn't hand you that orange push-up pop. You missed out.
Mm-hmm.
You missed out, and you have my you have my condolences.
I mean, they had to run ads to remind our parents that they had kids. It's
Yeah.
like, it's 9:30. Do you know where your kids are? It's like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I should probably figure that out.
Exactly. We're a different. And I try and tell my younger peers, because I do know people who are literally half my age, people who were born on this side of the year 2000 line, which just blows my mind. Don't get mad at Gen X for the way the world is. The boomers that were in charge when we were your age and younger are still in charge.
And they're still telling us it's not our turn yet.
And they're still, yeah. Some older Gen Xers are looking down the barrel of 70, and they're still being told by 89-year-olds that it's not their turn yet. So, yeah, trust me, guys. It sucks for us just as much as it sucks for you.
I got kids about to head off to college. I got, and it's to the point where it's like, I'm ready to retire, and they're still going, no, we're in charge. You can't make decisions. Yeah. It's like, okay.
I mean, that's why, like, somebody might walk in here but for the studio lights and everything, think that this is like, oh, this must be your son's room. No, it's my husband's. Well, if you're going to treat me like a child, society, I will continue to act like a child until I have a reason to grow up.
See, I think that's part of the problem Gen X has now. And one of the reasons I still play RPGs and will for a long time. When we were like 16, 17, 18 years old, we were expected to be like 30 and, have responsibilities and do stuff and have a job and, whatever else. And now that we're in our 50s, we're like, we still want to be 30 because we never really had a chance to be a kid as much.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
In some ways we did, but in other ways it's like you had to grow up quickly, or latchkey kids. You kind of grew up and raised yourself. And it just was what it was. I miss my Boy Scout canteen, to be honest. It was kind of cool, but
I still have my Crossman pellet rifle, my Crossman CO2 pellet rifle, man. I got to get a cartridge for that thing.
Shoot an eye out, kid.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I still have my dad's green Coleman thermos. Like, so when I go on road trips and stuff, people will be like, "Oh, what's that?" I'm like, "That's my coffee thermos." And they're like, "Really? That thing keeps coffee hot for like a day." It's just insane.
My mom got me a half-size one for school, and I would go to school with spaghetti leftovers and that thing sometimes, and like mom would heat them up on the stove. We didn't have a microwave. She would heat them up on the stove in the morning, load up the thermos, and 5 hours later at lunchtime, I'm eating piping hot spaghetti, and everybody else is like whatever nasty fried chicken the school was serving that day. It was great. Well, I think we've solved all of Gen X's woes tonight, Tim, unless you've got anything else you'd like to address.
No, I think just be sure you subscribe to Bill's channel. I'm around here someplace, but Bill does RPGs, and I really don't anymore. I do sort of fiction novels and stuff. But
he does if I show up.
Either if Bill shows up. But if you want to know whether or not Tom Clancy was getting help from the U.S. government, the answer is over on my channel. So it is in one of my videos. I finally cracked that code, but I'm still reading them and doing a whole playlist about it. And probably Friday I will have finished Debt of Honor, and I'm convinced Debt of Honor had two interesting things in it. One was Tom Clancy flew airplanes into a building to blow things up, which happened after that. But he also had, if you remember that book, Bill, I don't know if you ever read that one because it was one of the longer ones. The thing that started the conflict in it was a trade war. And the more I read this book, the more I'm like, oh shit.
Well, yeah. Let's we'll just on that note. And by the way, I want to answer Alan's question before we leave. Does the psychedelic game style does the psychedelic style give old D&D some of its mystique? Absolutely. Drop a tab of pure Gygax tonight, crack an AD&D book, and go on an absolute head trip.
And
Tim,
drink a vodka shot in the process.
Tim, thank you so much for being here. I will let you get back to it. Go enjoy your arcade.
I will.
Love you to pieces, man. As for the rest of you lot, I'll be back tomorrow night. Heidi Gygax Garland, Eric Garland, John Murakami, they're going to be here. We're going to be talking about Gaxland games. We're going to be talking about what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about EggCon. We're going to have an absolute blast. Tim will be back on Tuesday along with my super cool group of first edition AD&Ders. I'm really looking forward to seeing them. I will be back, of course, on Friday. I don't know what we'll be doing, but I'll be there. And I hope you guys will all come back too. Now, please, if you are watching the show with the provided 3D glasses, we will have someone outside collecting those. Don't fail to give them to them because it's a giant freaking owl bear. Peace. Good night. Love you all.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.